Most people think they know the story of the Garden of Eden: a man, a woman, a snake, a piece of fruit, a catastrophic decision, and a God who shows up afterward and sends everyone away. A tragedy in a garden, a beautiful beginning that went wrong. That's not wrong exactly. But it's also not the full picture. And what you miss when you read Eden only as a story about origins is everything the text is actually designed to show you. Because the Garden of Eden is not primarily a geography lesson. It is not primarily a botany lesson. And it is not primarily a story about why snakes don't have legs. It is a story about a temple. That claim sounds strange at first, but follow the text carefully, and it becomes difficult to see Eden any other way. Start with the word garden itself. In Hebrew, it's gian, a word that implies an enclosed, protected space. Not a wild forest, not a random meadow, a cultivated, bounded, intentional place. And in the ancient Near East, that kind of deliberate garden had a very specific cultural meaning. It was the space immediately adjacent to a royal palace or a sacred temple, a place where the king or the deity dwelt. Now look at what God does in the garden. Genesis 3 says, "He was walking in the garden in the cool of the day." The Hebrew verb for walking there is a very particular form. And scholars have noted that the exact same verb form is used later in the Old Testament to describe God's presence in the tabernacle and in the temple. In Leviticus 26, God says he will walk among his people. In Deuteronomy 23, the same verb describes God's presence in the camp. The movement of God in the garden is, grammatically speaking, the same movement of God in his holy sanctuary. And then look at what Adam is called to do. Genesis 2 says God placed Adam in the garden to work it and keep it. In English, that sounds agricultural, weeding and watering. But the Hebrew words for work and keep here are abad and shamar. And those two words appear together in a very significant place later in the Old Testament. Numbers 18, where God describes the role of the Levitical priests in the tabernacle: tend and guard the sanctuary. The same two words, the same pairing. Adam in Eden is doing what priests later do in the temple. This is not a coincidence. Biblical scholars, including G.K. Beale and John Walton, have argued extensively that Eden functions as the first temple, the original sacred space where heaven and earth overlapped, where God was present with humanity in an unmediated way, where a human being served as priest before there was a priesthood, and as king before there was a kingdom. The tree of life at the center of the garden echoes the menorah, the lampstand at the center of the tabernacle, designed in the shape of a flowering tree. The four rivers flowing out from Eden echo the water flowing from the temple in Ezekiel's vision, bringing life wherever it goes. The cherubim placed at the entrance to Eden after the fall echo the cherubim woven into the veil of the tabernacle, and the cherubim carved into the walls of Solomon's temple, guardians of sacred space. Eden is not just a garden. It is the original meeting place between God and humanity, the prototype of every sanctuary that comes after it, which means the fall is not just a moral failure. It is an expulsion from sacred space. Adam and Eve are not just removed from a nice garden. They are removed from the presence of God, from the place where heaven and earth touched, where they walked with their Creator in the cool of the day. And here is where the story does something remarkable, because the rest of the Bible, all of it, is the story of God working to get his people back into his presence. The tabernacle in the wilderness is a portable Eden. The cloud of God's glory filling it at its dedication echoes the presence of God in the garden. Solomon's temple is a permanent Eden, built with cedar panels carved with flowers and trees, and cherubim, a garden in stone. The prophets describe the future restoration of Israel in explicitly Edenic terms: rivers of water, fruit trees, the presence of God returning. And then the New Testament opens with a man walking in a garden. The Gospel of John is the only gospel that explicitly mentions a garden as the setting for Jesus' arrest. And then again, A garden as the setting where Mary first encounters the risen Jesus and mistakes him for a gardener. John knows exactly what he's doing. The last Adam is taking back what the first Adam lost. And Revelation ends as it began with Eden, the river of life, the tree of life, God dwelling with his people. But the garden has become a city because the temple has become the whole world. There is no more sanctuary within the city because the city itself is the sanctuary. God's presence, which was once confined to a garden, then to a tent, then to a temple, then to the body of Jesus, has now filled everything. The Garden of Eden is not a children's story about where babies come from or why snakes slither. It is the opening scene of the most ambitious story ever told. The story of a God who built a sacred space to be with his people, who refused to abandon them when they walked away from it, and who has been working ever since to bring them back. You were made for that garden, and the story is not over yet.